I suppose start with the topics in here. So I see there's something from the OpenStack team about the
Yeah,
HANFS.
that's basically the POC that we made with KeepLiveD1 virtual IP, one Ganesha daemon, without the HA proxy layer. So basically, there is the description of the POC and the document, and you can see that is working as expected. So at least for the solution that we discussed a couple of weeks ago regarding the one VIP, one Ganesha, this should be useful.
Right.
We didn't have the chance to test this kind of solution with multiple virtual IP and multiple Ganesha, but at least at the on the OSP side, having this POC is the same of the current solution that we have today. So we can update the tracker, probably adding these findings, this POC, and we can talk more about the CFDM changes that we probably need.
All right. Yeah, I know we're gonna need at least a standalone Keep Alive D to use over the VIP. Obviously, I haven't read through this document yet. Was there a lot of additional changes you had to make? Is it really hard to set up, or is it actually end up being sort of
No,
straightforward?
no. It's pretty much a manual process. I made a private. If you look at the second link at the bottom of the document, there is a change that I made in Ceph ADM. It's basically for the. I'm not too much familiar with the Ingress daemon, but I know that you can deploy two different containers, one for Keep Alive D, one for HA proxy. What I did is adding a key within the cluster using the manager set store and get store functions, right? So if you detect that the ingress mode is direct, we can have a boolean or something like that, you can just skip the HA proxy part, returning as a primary daemon keep alive D instead of HA proxy, and then leaving everything the same. But I'm not sure it's the right approach, so feel free to look at it as an inspiration.
Yeah. I mean, it's really just what we need to do. That I mean, we can figure out how the best way to deploy just to keep alive D is, but the more important part, as far as I'm concerned, is what we need to actually be doing, not how we're doing.
Yeah, and the main change for this commit is related to the keep alive D config that should be different if you don't have any HA proxy, like the check script, something like that, to keep the container alive.
And I see it looks like you did something in a unit test that showed. Um, there's this unit. So the example in the unit test and that commit you added, that's sort of what it's supposed to look like.
There is the test ingress service RGW. Oh, I probably
There's a testing ingress service NFS class you added in this
yeah,
commit.
yeah, because in the previous commit we had the test ingress service, which is generic. It's the same for RGW and NFS. We need to we need to have two different classes, because at this point, if you are going to use the NFS direct modes, which means only keep alive D, you need to make sure that the config is different this time, and that's the reason why we should uh, have a different class.
Yeah, I mean, what we'll probably have to do is have it be able to specify whether you want the ingress to be just the keep alive or not, and then we probably still
Yeah,
want this generic one because I don't think we're going to remove the NFS HA with the HA proxy. I think we were just going to add this as another option. Um,
yeah, right. And in theory, this is another option. It's not just removing the HA proxy for NFS. It's just looking at the store key within the manager and see if you need to go with the direct mode with K5D or having HA proxy and kplfd. There is no way, as far as I know, in the Ingress daemon to look at the backend. So you first have NFS, and then you have the Ingress daemon. And in the Ingress daemon, you are able to specify the backend type. So you just know if it's NFS or LGW. In this case, we need the other way around. We need to have an Ingress daemon that owns an IP address, and then you need to check if it's NFS and it's direct. You just need kplfd bound to that instance.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it's a different logic, but we can work on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so we're gonna have some extra settings with the ingress spec that are gonna have to help us figure out we're doing this
Yeah,
instead.
yeah, that's probably easier having having an additional field in the spec.
I'm trying to just look through the rest of it real quick. So beyond the individual keep alive D on top of the NFS, was there any other stuff we had to do on the host? Any sort of there's no like IP stable stuff or anything like I did before, or
No, no. And the POC you can see at step 2, we basically tweaked the Ganesha container. CephADM basically creates the working directory with the FSID of the cluster. We have the container and all the run scripts that are translated into the unit. We have this script. So what we did is duplicating some information and the unit, the systemd unit, and running an additional daemon. So CephADM wasn't aware about this additional daemon, of course, because we did it manually. But it was this yet another gateway, Ganesha gateway for the CephFS. And the difference was that we manually changed the bind address pointing to the VIP instead of the IP address assigned by CephADM.
Well, I understand changing the const for the bind address. What were you saying about having an extra daemon? What was that?
Uh,
The unit run file, you were doing something.
yeah, we just duplicated the unit run file, and
Oh, okay.
we created a different mount point for the Ganesha conf with a different bind address, just to demonstrate that you can run a Ganesha daemon bound to the virtual IP. Of course, CephADM is not aware because we manually
Yeah.
duplicated the working directory,
So to
right?
be clear, real quick, so this was not you were running like two different daemons for this one thing. You were just this was a manual daemon you were doing for testing. This was
Yeah,
not.
yeah, right.
Yeah, that's good to hear. I thought for a second you were trying to run two NFS daemons at once to make this work. But yeah, that should be fine because it seems like if we just get the config right the first time in CFADM, we shouldn't have to do any manual stuff at all.
Yeah,
So
of
we'll just I
course.
guess
Yeah, this is just for demonstrate that we can do that. Um, then there is some work to do for both the Ingress daemon to run one kplfd, but it's just half of the work. The other half, the other 50% is basically having Ganesha bound to the virtual IP owned by kplfd. So we need a connection between the Ingress daemon and the Ganesha instance for
yeah.
sure.
I wonder if it's worth even making one spec for this, like I don't know what you call it yet, but some sort of spec that you can set all these things in, and so we'll make like right now we have like there would be two different services, but you could technically, if you wanted to, you could have one spec cause it to deploy two different services, and we could use that as a way of deploying this, where it'll know the NFS will know that it's like the special one that needs to use this different bind address, and the keep alive or the ingress will know that it's a special one that needs only the keep alive. We could do something like that, or there's also the option of just adding a bunch of stuff to the NFS and ingress specs individually, um, that they can know that there are individually that type. That's probably maybe the easy way to do it, but it's all Um,
Yeah, it probably makes sense. I mean, we can inherit from the existing classes and create a different spec with additional parameters that we can fill. So we can keep the same behavior from the old components, adding extra values that can be used to reach this kind of behavior.
yeah. Anyway, so it sounds like what the overall thing has to happen is we need to be able to deploy the Ingress with just the keep alive D with a modified config, and then we need to be able to deploy NFS with a modified config stuck to a different address.
You need to deploy Ganesha pointing to the virtual IP defined for the Ingress daemon, which is just made by keep-alive-d.
Yeah.
That's the tricky part because you need this connection between the Ingress daemon and Ganesha. While before in the HA proxy model, it's the reverse. You have the backend deployed, and then you have the Ingress daemon pointing to a specific backend. Now you need to avoid losing this connection between the Ingress daemon and Ganesha. I mean, you need the virtual IP up and running on the host before running the Ganesha daemon because you need to bind the process to that IP address.
Okay, so it matters what order we deploy them in this time.
Yeah, the order for me was different. First, keep alive D, and then Ganesha bound to the virtual IP owned by keep alive D.
All right. And did you ever end up testing putting this on two different hosts? Does the keep alive D have to be in the same host as the NFS?
We didn't test this part. We just tested client restrictions. So keep alive D and Ganesha were on the same host, and we tried to mount on from two different hosts according to the client restriction that we made.
Okay.
So this might be a test that we can do. I
Yeah.
guess during the development phase, we can do this kind of test.
Yeah, I mean, I'll have to read through this in more detail, but it sounds like it's mostly um, just modifying the ingress and the keep alive, or ingress to deploy this keep alive D, the mess with the NFS connection config a little bit, and then we have to sort of tie them together so that they're deployed in the right order. They know about each other a little bit. Nothing that
Yeah, I think.
sounds. Hmm?
Sorry, I was going to say. I think the hard part would be that making sure that whenever the replacement Ganesha daemon is brought up, wherever it's brought up, we need to have keep alive D there, right? So we didn't have the restriction previously because HA proxy and keep alive D, the way they worked, it was we didn't have to care about it. All we did was edit the backend. Backend section of the HA proxy file to add the new IP of the Ganesha server. But now we need to make sure that wherever we have the replacement daemon brought up, Ganesha daemon brought up, we need to have keep alive D there. So there's a,
So does it need to be on the same host as the NFS daemon?
I think so, right? Because the
Sorry?
Ganesha server,
In the same host, keep alive
yeah,
D and
and
Ganesha?
Ganesha, yeah, yeah.
I don't think so because if you have this option, the non-local bind, which is something that we had in our environment, in theory, you can bind process to a non-local IP, which is what we have today in OSP. So in theory, they shouldn't be on the same host, regardless of the test that we did.
Okay. Yeah, I assume that they had to be on the same host. Yeah.
Well, we'll have to figure that one out. I can try to, I guess when we start working on it, maybe to have a default to put them on the same host anyway, but we'll have to figure out at some point whether that's a real restriction or not. But other than that, this stuff looks really cool. I'll have to look through it in more detail, but it sounds like it's mostly just going to have to be figuring out the implementation detail behind the scenes for Ceph ADM. Sounds like you guys have figured out what really needs to happen, what I was looking for. Um, I don't have any other questions on it right now myself, and I'll have to spend some time and go through it some more. Does anyone else have anything they want to ask Francesco or Romana about how this works or anything? Right, like I said, I'll look through this. It looks like it's really well done. Um, I'll see about how we can start implementing it, and then we'll just have to figure out that one outstanding question about whether Keep Alive D and NFS need to be co-located or not. But other than that, looks like we have somewhere to go moving forward. Part of the same thing. Um, so anything else for that topic, or anything else wanted to say about the NFS stuff, or should we just give it a week for like me and anyone else on the SFDM team to go over it and come back to it next week to see if we have any more stuff? In that case, we can keep going here. Tracker is new. Is this tracker for the? Okay, that's just the itch NFS. Well, I guess we're on to this Rook NFS connection issues with node failures. You want to talk about this?
Yeah, and this is more of a question. So thanks. I mean, last week we were talking internally with the Rook team and especially Blaine, and he was saying that there was an issue where if you had a Ganesha cluster that you're able to stand up with Rook, and you basically had one of the Ganesha servers suffering a node failure, the cluster would actually be inoperational. I mean, you couldn't, if there were clients connected to some other Ganesha server in the cluster, they'd also not be able to, perform reads or writes. So is this, I mean, I'm not sure if I'm capturing this correctly, Blaine, so feel free to correct me. So I just wanted to like dig in and see if this issue is being tracked somewhere, or if we should be, trying to reproduce that, or.
I think I do remember a little bit about that with some of our HNFS testing with the other way, with the HA proxy, not the way we were just talking about. Where I know we had tried in the Ceph ADM to implement a failover. So if you could specify a placement that gave like more room for daemons and you actually went down. And then if one of them went down, we would move the failed daemon somewhere else, or so we would just deploy another one somewhere else. And we also like do some fencing and stuff around it, so that's with like the ranks and everything. Make sure that's all good. So I think we did see the same issue where if you like one of them goes down and you have more of them, it doesn't work. Like it doesn't work with the reduced number of them. You needed to have all of them up. But in CephADM, our solution to that was just essentially to fail over the broken one somewhere else, and just get the cluster back to the right size so that it could take reads and writes again. Yeah, I think we have seen it, but that was as in our heads we had sort of already found a way to address it through the failover system.
I see. And so is the current approach that, I mean, so if you have a place to bring up the failed Ganesha server, everything is back to normal again.
Yeah, so the way it
And
works
this,
is at least in Ceph with the placements and everything, you do is say you had like a label on like 5 hosts for like NFS or something, and you tell it to put them on those hosts, but you also say like I want a count of 3, so we would pick 3 of the 5 hosts and put them there. And then if one of the hosts goes down, or yeah, usually so the NFS daemon itself shouldn't necessarily be failing because we try to restart it anyway with systemd. But if like whether one of the hosts goes down, so that then they're only have like 2 of the NFSs running, it will then pick one of the other of the 5 hosts and then put an NFS daemon there instead, and then it'll change all of the ranks and everything so that they all work again, and then they would become operable again. And at least in like a small cluster, um, where you don't have other things, operations in the way that we do before we do the redeploys, it would seem like it would take like a minute or two, and then you'd be able to do reads and writes again. At least from when Mike Fritsch was testing it before, it seemed like it was working all right.
makes sense. And we are aware that this issue is on the Rook side still. it has been
Yeah,
solved
we,
on the
we hadn't
Ceph
been
side.
tracking it really on the Rook side. We were concerned with the Ceph EDM one when we were implementing it. But I guess yeah, if Rook doesn't have any implementation for some sort of failover like that, then yeah, if one of the NFS hosts goes down, then I don't think you'd be able to read and write until someone does something to deploy another one somewhere else.
Hmm.
Can
Makes
I
sense.
ask
Yep.
a related question? It what is it about the NFS protocol, or I guess maybe just NFS Ganesha, that this is the intended behavior of the cluster? Like in yeah, I mean like with Ceph, with pretty much any clustered kind of software, you assume there are outages and you assume that they there are times when they can't be brought back up. Um, is is this something that should realistically be an issue brought up with uh, the NFS Ganesha project?
I had thought about that as well. I don't remember why. I feel like someone asked them, but I don't remember what they said. I'm not really a great person to sort of answer why it's like that. I know I'd also been really confused when we found out that it worked that way, that we actually couldn't just use the standby ones that we had and just have them read and write there. Um, yeah, you have to ask somebody, I guess, who knows FS a little bit better. I'm not sure if anyone here has that sort of expertise or not.
I mean, we can email Jeff for that question. I think the all of them are active. So we have Ganesha as a concept of standbys. So the remaining active ones are put in grace period, and I think they're waiting on the replacement daemon to come up within a few minutes. So if that doesn't happen, I don't know why. I expect the grace period to be lifted and the other two Ganesha servers to start serving their existing clients, but the clients that were connected to the previous server that went down, I'm not sure what happens there. So we can ask Jeff that question because he architected this active Ganesha solution where the Radar's backend coordinates the grace period, Radar's pool-based backend. So were you observing that the existing clients of the servers that didn't go down, even those clients weren't being served after one of the hosts went down?
Is that a
But
question
I
to me?
think those, yeah, one of the Rook team, but you guys, when you were testing it, did you see like if you kept trying to write to these NFS servers, you see after like the grace period expired, did you see like new writes or reads? Did those work, or
Oh,
was it?
I mean to be clear, we have not tested that. We haven't been focused on the active HA. I'm aware of the issue because someone mentioned it. I think in this meeting some time ago. So I know that it is something we have to be concerned about, but it's not something that I've gone out of my way to try to test, given that we're only focusing on a single NFS server at the moment.
Okay. All right. I don't think I'd say it would probably be Mike Fritch actually would be the person I would ask about that, but he's on vacation right now. I think for next week or two. He was one who's doing a lot of the HA NFS testing stuff. Um, I don't know exactly what scenario he was testing. I know he was testing with reads and writes that were in progress already, um, and seeing what happened with those ones and making sure those would eventually continue if we like did the failover stuff we talked about earlier. I don't know if he tried with new reads and writes after the period ended. I mean, there was no failover. I don't know if that situation ever came up. I don't know if you know if that works or not. You have to find out.
Yep, absolutely. No, and thank you for this discussion because you actually made me think on a different direction. And I think I'd seen some of Jeff's blogs that actually talked about this issue. So we might be able to track it from there and create a tracker. Um, if we can't do if we don't have the failover bits Rook yet.
Yeah. Could you also just include me on like if you find any resources like that, I'm also curious too.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah.
I'll share.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I mean, I'd also be interested if they end up learning some stuff about how that works, because I don't know the details either. Be good for everyone, I think.
Sure thing. Yep.
All right. Anyone have anything else you want to say about this topic, NFS failures? All right. So that was the last topic we have in the agenda right now for today. Does anyone have any other topics they want to bring up here? Doesn't seem like it. In that case, I guess we can end here, and I will see you all next week. Bye.
Yeah. Thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.